Welcome back to Fizz and Tell. And today I've got the wonderful Katy with me. Now, Katy, before you introduce yourself, I'm just going to give a quick intro because I was introduced to you by another friend of mine. And I'm on this journey of trying to re-tap into my body and lose a bit of weight, but the conventional things aren't working. So I was introduced to the lovely Katy, and Katy did to me what I do to clients within about 10 minutes and unraveled me completely. And I thought, right, I've just got to have her on my podcast to show everybody the wonderful work that Katy does. So, Katy, please introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Genevieve. I'm so pleased to be here. My name is Katy Landis, and I help women lose weight, not just by looking at the food, but by looking at their emotional, spiritual, physical relationship, even their mental relationship with food, just with body, mind, heart, and soul. So instead of looking at just the food, I do a complete 180-degree turn and look back, as I had to do with myself, at the person. It's more what's going on here and here than just about the food.
And, you know, it's such a refreshing approach to hear because we're told eat less, move more. There's so many fad diets that are out there, and I've yo-yoed with most of them over the years. Since I had my son, my body completely changed. I was never more than sort of 7 stone. I was tiny, tiny, tiny. Then all of a sudden, having my son just threw my body into a whole different arena. And I think we get to this stage, especially with menopause. I'm going to be 53 next week. And it's all of these things that we're told what we should be doing, what we should be eating. But the minute you asked me one specific question, I realized it actually isn't about that. It was totally about my relationship with food and my relationship with myself around how I saw myself with food. And that just blew my mind. It completely blew my mind. So I've got so many friends waiting for this podcast to come out, and I know this will be one that loads of women will really relate to. So, Katy, do you want to share your journey with this?
Yeah, of course. Unlike you, I wasn't slim until I had children, which is very common. People who actually, those women that haven't had to watch their weight, like you, it's a bit of a shock when you get to a certain age and have to. But I didn't have that problem. That sounds quite good to me. I had it, I can't remember a time in my life, apart from the last 15 years since I've changed everything, and I'm 58 now, I can't remember a time when food was just food. It was never just food. It was always like, oh, what shall I have? I've had too much of that. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have had that. Oh, now I've put on weight. How much calorie? I was like, was it the Terminator when he could see things through a certain lens? I was like that, but it was calories. I'd eat something and my mind would go click, 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 click. 97 calories. I mean, and this was from the age of 12 or 13.
Wow.
So the way I tried to control it was to go on a diet. And I loved being on a diet because I was told what to do and I would follow the plan and I would lose weight and I would feel great. Of course, I would lose weight. I was a teenager. I was in my 20s to begin with. I would lose weight. It would last for a week or two, but then I wouldn't know how to be in a world of food without being told how to eat.
Yeah.
And I would put it on again. And I didn't just do this 2 or 3 times. I did this for 3 decades. 3 decades. And as I got a bit older, it wasn't 10 pounds or 20. It would be 1.5 stone. I don't know if people think in pounds a stone. I'm at the age where I do. So it would be 30 pounds. And it would just, apart from one glorious time when I found a 6-week diet, and it was called the Beverly Hills diet, which sounded really glamorous.
Yeah.
and I did that, and then I did it twice, and I was in the body I wanted to be. Yeah. And the minute it set, I mean, I'm talking about hours after the diet finishes, the very next morning, I could feel the food call me as if by a magnet. And the arms go out as if they don't belong to you. and the mouth opens to eat something you vowed you're not going to eat anymore.
Yeah.
So what's going on? And I think that's the question. What's going on at that moment?
Mm.
And it took me a long time to get to that moment, that I kept thinking the next shiny eating plan was going to do it for me. And I don't think we're stupid. I think we know that eating natural food, the way our grandparents ate,
Yeah.
you know, you do look at photographs back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, everybody is really quite lean.
Yeah.
But we are bombarded with not just fast food, but food in supermarkets that say healthy eating, and they go in a microwave and they can last for months because they're full of chemicals, and our bodies aren't utilizing them the way natural food is meant to be, not the food that we're designed to eat.
Yeah.
And, you know, even when I was a child, it would be a tube of sweets. Now I have teenagers. Kids think it's normal to get a family bag or
Yeah.
two to take
Yeah.
to the cinema.
Yeah.
Everything has changed. So I had to look at me and the root cause of my overeating.
Mm.
And that was a bumpy ride.
Yeah.
And that's when I healed. And so when I work with people and with myself, the losing the weight is actually a side effect of looking after me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I see people, their number one thing that they want is to lose weight. I know that. But it is a side effect of the healing and the transformation of using the food struggle as a door to walk through that can give you such peace in your life. You know, I can eat a meal and I'm not obsessed with food. That kind of obsession of, you know, how much should I eat? When should I eat? Have I eaten too much? What am I going to eat? I'm going out with friends. Do I not eat before?
Yeah.
Just that whole inner dialogue we have to become aware of.
Yeah. And it is that, isn't it? And I think there's always, for me, it's if I do have something that I class as a treat, chocolate or a dessert or something, you know, an ice cream, even going out with friends, I then have this huge amount of guilt for eating it rather than enjoying it. And
So true. So true. And I
mm,
don't actually think it's guilt. I think it's shame,
oh,
because it's very difficult, but
okay.
the difference between guilt and shame. And I think guilt is a healthy thing. It stops us, you know, maybe as a teenager, you might have nicked something from a shop age 14, and then you think that's wrong, you know, or you snap at someone, a family member usually, and it's guilt that makes you think that wasn't the best version of me, I want to change that. But shame isn't something you've done, it's who you are.
Mm,
It's not that what you've done is wrong, but that you're at your very core wrong. And that's how I used to feel. So if I ate something, it was like, oh, here I go again, making another
yeah,
mistake, eating the wrong thing, not being like everybody else. Just that self blame,
yeah,
not being good enough, not being worthy enough.
yeah, yeah.
And that was driving me, but I wasn't even aware of it.
Mm.
Shame is, it's quite insidious. It's a very difficult thing to think I'm running on shame now.
But it makes total sense what you're saying, Katie. It really does. And I think we all have these shame responses
Mm.
that growing up, for whatever reason, whatever trauma or whatever has triggered these shame responses, they stay with us until we actually get to the bottom of them.
That's exactly it. You've said it in a nutshell better than I would have done. It comes from way back in the past.
Yeah.
It's we carry it around and we're not aware that we're carrying it around. I always work with people with awareness, acceptance, and action, because you've got to be aware, and it takes a while, especially if you've been like me and you've used food to push the feelings down and numb
But
and
I think we all do
self-medicate.
that, Katie. Do you not think that we all use food either to punish ourselves in some sort of way and also as an escape in other ways? I've gone through all of it. When I was as a teenager, I was like a stick insect. In fact, I was kind of borderline anorexic.
Yeah.
And I used food as a control because I danced and I wanted to be, I wanted to make sure I was always in the top of the dance group. And I knew that those that didn't look a particular way didn't get there. So I used food to control the outcome.
What's interesting about what you just said is that it shows that, first of all, you're a perfectionist because you wanted to be the top. It's like, that's control. And
Yes.
then there's the people pleasing of being the good dancer, of being the good
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah.
And actually, you'd have been the person that I looked at that age and thought, I want to be like her. I mean, somebody at my school actually had anorexia, and I thought, oh, I could have that for a few weeks. That's the thinking. But it's just the same control and self-punishment as overeating.
Yeah, totally, totally. And I think
And
food has this effect on us, or we have this effect, or this relationship with food that is all about control in a way.
especially on women who,
Yeah.
I think now men as well, but when I was young, it was more on women. And I think just about all of my girlfriends, but most of the women I know are like that. But there are some that aren't because they seem to be able to eat what they like and not put weight on. So they don't always get that. But we can have it with anything, It could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be gambling, it could be scrolling on your phone. Not there's anything wrong with that, but when you're using it to numb and not deal with whatever life has thrown at you that day.
Yeah, it's all an escape. It's
It's
all an
all an
escape.
escape.
Yeah. And it's escaping from dealing with those feelings that you don't want to face more often than not. And that's what was interesting when you sat down with me, and within 10 minutes, probably because I'm hyper aware, it just completely unraveled. And it's like, oh God, I've got to do something about this now.
It's
quite
actually, it's so
extraordinary.
easy when I mean, we were just having a chat and there you were after 10 minutes, opening your heart in such a courageous, open way to me. And then it's so easy to work with someone when they can do that, because that's the difficult thing.
Yeah.
Actually, we get so used to pointing the finger and blaming,
Yeah.
especially when things are unfair, and
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And we
But
probably can
sometimes we
blame
have to
loads
look
of
up,
different things. We can
yeah,
blame loads of different things. Yeah.
yeah, especially, with big stuff in life when someone's, cheated and been unfaithful or lied or all sorts of things. It's so easy. You're allowed your feelings around this, but you can get stuck in the resentment and the bitterness, and the only person it's hurting is that person.
Yeah.
So to open up our hearts and talk about that, not that you were talking about that, but it's even on the really big stuff, it frees us up.
Yeah.
And you were asking me about myself, and I can't remember a time, as I said, but I do have this memory when I was 6 or 7, and I went to a friend's house to stay the night, and there was a big jar of nuts and raisins, and we didn't have food out in our place. So I was like, oh, and nobody was around, and I was like, the fist was going in and the mouth was opening, and I didn't know about diets then. But I remember a sort of slightly euphoric feeling of feeling okay while I was doing it. I was going through a very difficult home life at the time, with parents divorcing and all the madness going on, because people can divorce in a very healthy way for kids, but that's not what was happening with me, and the stepfather, and all sorts of things were going on. And I could remember sort of feeling a sort of momentary bliss, I suppose, a numbing, a pushing down.
Yeah.
And then when I'd finished, the shame, I wouldn't have called it shame. And I didn't know about diets, but I remember thinking, what I've done is bad. I will be good tomorrow, which was my whole thinking with diets. Oh, I've done it now. I might as well carry on eating. I'll be good. I'll be good from tomorrow. And then tomorrow it would be, I'll be good from Monday, because Monday's a good day to start.
Monday's the great day to start. Not.
Start life next week.
Yeah.
When I'm slim, I'll get the job I want. I'll get the man I want. I'll be the person that I can be. But it's always tomorrow.
Yes.
Because I'm not good enough for today.
Yeah. And that you've hit the nail on the head with, I'm not good enough today. And I think when we live in that space of I'm not good enough today, we're often frightened of what will good enough look like and will we actually get there. So sometimes it's easier just to stay in I'm not good enough mode. It really is.
It's really interesting you say that, because when I first started working with people, I do it with a week by week kind of process. But then I realized, especially the people who are doing really well, there's a self-sabotage moment. And I can almost pinpoint when it's going to come. So then I start working with people just for 3 months, because I can catch them in the self-sabotage, and
Yeah.
it can be used as a springboard for real change.
Yeah.
Because that's how we operate. We don't go step forward, we go 3 steps forwards, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. We move slowly forward, but it's not linear.
Yeah.
And we come across our own boundaries of, am I good enough? Do I deserve this?
Yeah.
And I like being there to catch people and using it as a springboard for even more change, because we do make mistakes.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's when you watch nothing to do with weight loss, but something like Dragon's Den, where you get these people who are at the top of their game. And yet when sometimes they reveal that they failed so much before they got there. And if they hadn't have gone through the failures, they never would have been able to reach where they are. And it's part of learning. It's not failing, it's just part of learning.
And that's so true. And I say the same when I'm doing relationship coaching. It's the same methodology that I always equate it to. It's a game of snakes and ladders. And you can have some big wins and you've got these big ladders, and then you can have some big losses and get almost back to square one again if you get the head of the snake and you're back to square one again. And it's okay. It's okay. But it's if you've got to just keep going till you reach your end goal, till you reach that end game. And I think that's the difficulty with anything like this, where it is psychological, actually. It's deeply rooted in the psychological trauma and everything else. And where we get anything that we can go into sabotage mode, it can be relationships, it can be food, it can be addiction. They're all sabotage areas. And we approach it in the same way.
And food is an addiction.
It is.
And
Whether
it's
you're
just
good with
not
it
one
or bad with it.
Say that again.
Whether you're good with the food or bad with the food.
And you can't go cold turkey with it. You can't,
No.
well, you can, I mean, you can have cold turkey, but you can't, but you need to keep eating.
Yeah.
And I really like this snakes and ladders analogy, because sometimes there's a really long snake and things happen that are devastating. You know, people we love die, illnesses, divorce, really big stuff happens. But sometimes that's almost easier because it's so black and white.
Yeah.
But on a day-to-day basis, sometimes, it's someone at work has been rude, or the person behind has been driving too fast, or the person, all the little stuff. Or it could be me, myself, and I in a room just remembering a time when someone was a bit unkind. And it's that everydayness that we have to look at, and how we can press the pause button when we suddenly find that we're face first in the fridge and we don't quite know how we got there.
Yes.
And
or down the aisle at the shops, and all of a sudden
Yes.
you're looking at the chocolates, and then the next thing you've purchased the chocolates and they're in your shopping bag, and they don't even get home because you're eating them in the car because you don't want anyone to see that you've bought them in the first place. That's what I'm guilty of.
they never, not just sometimes, never for me did they ever get home. And it's almost like while you're eating, you're momentarily numbing, pushing it down, punishing, comforting, controlling, so many things. By the way, if anyone thinks there's an old man in the background, that's my dog making a few noises on the sofa, those sort of in case they got caught. Yeah, I mean, I used to get my kids Easter stuff. And then once I started, I wouldn't stop, and I have to go out and buy them a whole new Easter egg.
I know.
before they woke up.
Oh, I've
I
done the
mean,
same. I've done exactly the same. But it's so interesting how we get here. And when we go back to, you were hyper aware when you were younger about being mindful about food. I could eat. I was lucky in a way I could eat anything I wanted, but then I was pretty much hyperactive. I was always on the go. I was burning it off constantly. And I think whichever way we were when we were younger, as we get older and our bodies change, we have to change and we have to adapt to suit where we are now and who we are now. And I say this, I keep saying the same thing in relationship coaching, but it's you've got to do what's right for you today, not what perhaps you got away with 20, 30, 40 years ago.
it's so true. I mean, I'm actually the same as I was then, because I didn't have the awareness of what I was doing then. It's only now I do. But when we got our weekly pocket money, I would go to the shops and buy my sweets, and my brother in the 70s would buy dark chocolate, which was practically unheard of then. He would have a couple of squares and put it away for later. I mean, I would then be hankering after his, and that's my default setting.
Mm,
My default setting, that's who I am. And I'm not responsible for my first thought. It's my second thought I can be responsible for. I can't change that. I mean, in a way, it has changed because I don't have the desire for it anymore like that. But it's my second thought. What can I do? What can I put in place when I'm being pulled to food? Because the being pulled to food is almost the first thought. And
mm,
it's not like we think, oh, I'm in a bit of pain here. I'm wanting to eat something. That awareness isn't there. It's, I want to eat something.
mm.
That's when we ask ourselves, what's really going on here?
Yeah,
And that's when we interrupt the craving.
yeah. And
And
I've
it
lost
takes a bit
three
of
pounds
practice.
since we've last spoken just from stopping
Love that.
that question, just questioning myself, okay, why do I want to eat the whole packet? What's happened that I need to eat this whole packet of chocolate right now? And will one square do? And it's having that internal dialogue going on that's really interesting. So, that was huge, just what we did in that short space of time. And
And we only spoke for 10 or 15 minutes.
I know,
So
I know.
it's just, it's so huge and there's so much you can do. And there's quite a lot to do. But once you start, it creates such freedom.
Yeah,
Because at the same time, I always talk about extreme self-care with people,
yeah,
which really goes back to the basics. And we always think about self-care as I don't know, manicures or a facial, which nothing wrong with that. But it can just be something that we can do every day.
yeah,
Because especially those of us who are mothers, we're very good at putting other people ahead of ourselves.
yeah.
And we're not
And then
always,
feeling guilty, and then feeling guilty if we don't
yes,
do something for ourselves. It's back into that cycle of guilt, shame. It's all of that. We're
you
back
go
in.
back into the cycle, not just with food, with the kind of overeat, regret, sending you back to the food because you feel bad,
Yeah,
but life. I've actually given myself some time. I want to make sure that I sleep well, because if I don't sleep well, I'm hungrier. Then you have to look after your stress. Then you have to look after your food, connection to others. It goes right back to the basics.
mm,
And I find that the people who've got the most difficulty with food are the people who put themselves at the end of their list.
mm.
They're so used to making sure that everyone around them is okay,
Yeah,
whether it's their children, their partner, their elderly parents, their good friends. They're there for them and they're so giving and so loving. And somewhere down the line, we've learned that that's the way to be.
yeah,
And it can feel so bloody selfish when you look after yourself.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas
And we
a
are
lot of
riddled with
people,
guilt. We are riddled. We're
yeah,
conditioned as mothers to be riddled with guilt if we do things for us rather than our children.
and I've really noticed that it can be different with men. And I'm not, maybe
Sorry, everyone, we kind of lost the internet connection for a moment. So we'll go back to what we were talking about and then carry on. So sorry about that technical glitch. It's one of those days, isn't it, Katie?
It definitely is. I can't remember what you said. Was it about guilt
We're talking about
and
guilt.
shame?
Yeah.
Just the way that as women, we put ourselves at the bottom of the list and make sure that everybody else is okay.
Yeah.
And actually, the more that we can fill up from the inside, the better version we are of ourselves. We're a better parent, a better partner, a better friend, a better work colleague. But we need to keep ourselves full. And, you know, I don't think it's a coincidence on a plane they say put the oxygen mask on yourself before the child, because if you're out cold, you're of no use to your child whatsoever.
Yeah.
But when we're running on empty, you know, we're not the best version of ourselves. We don't feel good. And the ripple effect that we're giving isn't great either. So it's not selfish. Self-care is not selfish.
So what can we do to help ourselves get into this better headspace and psychological space to even be able to access the work that you do?
Yes, because when I work with people, it's very much knowing of what they're eating and how they're feeling. But one of the simple things I do is I call it the PEACE method, the acronym PEACE. And it's about learning to press the pause button not when you've got the food in your hand and it's going towards your mouth, because it's a bit late there.
Yes.
But it's when you have that thought, I'm going to eat something. And we can all press the pause button for 1 minute. If someone said to you 15, well, that's too long, but we can all do 60 seconds. I'm going to eat the food, but in 60 seconds. So what's the PEACE? P is just for the pause. And just by pausing, you are stepping out of the whirlwind of the moment.
Yeah.
And you evaluate what's going on. That's the E. You ask yourself what's going on. And just by asking yourself a question, you're not in that part of the brain that's immediate gratification, the childlike part, which is exactly what you're talking about when it comes from long ago and trauma.
Yeah.
Not instant gratification, instant, I don't want to be feeling this, and getting into the prefrontal cortex, which is more governance. So you ask yourself a question, what am I really hungry for, really? What's going on? Am I upset? Am I angry? And usually when you're angry, what's going on underneath the anger? Sometimes it's easy to go, oh, I'm irritated. But then there's another question, why am I irritated? Am I feeling forgotten, unloved, uncared for? Am I bored? Just by asking these questions, you're giving yourself the 60 seconds, you're stepping out of the moment. Then there's A, to accept that you're there. Acceptance. Yeah, I'm actually feeling a bit upset. And it could be from something obvious, waiting for a phone call. It could just be for that very moment you're feeling a bit overwhelmed and lonely. Accept that you're there. And then C, I have a choice. I'm going to either choose to eat this, which we all know numbs momentarily. And it's only when we come up for air, having eaten it, we actually feel 10 times worse.
Yeah.
It's almost like a fuck it moment. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
You know, sod it. Not even going to think. And then I feel worse. So what do we do when we feel worse? We have to go back for more numbing. And actually, the only time that we stop is when we seem to have transferred the pain, the emotional pain, into the physical pain. Because actually now my stomach is so full, I'm not going to eat anymore. It can even go that far as I'm uncomfortable. Now I can stop. So you have a choice, and you know what you want for yourself and what you're worth. And then E is empowerment, because whatever choice you've made, even if you choose to eat, you've had 1 minute when you haven't. Yeah. Or maybe you've had 2. We really get to 5 and 10 really quickly.
Oh,
so this is
I'll
not...
probably be having this argument for half an hour.
Yeah. And you know, cravings pass, especially if I'm looking at someone's food and making sure that it really is full of the good stuff. Yeah. Not the diet stuff, the good stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm a foodie.
It's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference. You know, I love food. I'm a foodie. And the only reason I've stayed at this weight for 15 years is because I'm satisfied. So I know if I'm craving, it's not a nutritional craving.
Yes.
It's an emotional. And that's when we have to
this is when
get
we
the awareness of what it is.
Yeah.
And that's when we have to start the real self-love, understanding and compassion. The kind of one we're so used to giving our children, our friends, and everybody else. And it's time, hello, for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to forgive ourselves, because we think that we've made so many mistakes with food or whatever, and that it's our fault. And it's never our fault, ever.
And I love the peace analogy. So pause, evaluate. Oh, pause,
Acceptance.
Acceptance, choice.
Yes.
And then the empowerment.
See, I love it. You've got 4 out of 5 straight away. I wanted to make it really easy.
Yeah.
And there's lots of other things, but that's just one of the simple things. And then within each segment, we can go deeper.
No, absolutely.
But it's, and also the other thing with the self, it just came into my mind, with the self-care and the self-love and understanding, is if we can't offer it to ourselves, if we can just find a photograph of ourselves really young, 2 or 3, those sort of that bright-eyed vulnerability, complete innocence. Do we deserve to be spoken to like that? And you know, does little Katie, little Genevieve, you know, here you go again, stupid. No, you deserve love and care and understanding, you precious little thing. And that's what we need.
It's so true. And I think sometimes also, I mean, I've got a young granddaughter who's 6, and I've also, you know, and other people have got other young people, and you think, would you talk to them like that? Would you want that for them? And sometimes you have to think about it for someone else before you can flick the switch over to your little self. And I think if you're one of these people that's been so used to doing it for other people, it's sometimes, for me, I think, well, I wouldn't talk to my granddaughter like that about food. And then I think about me at her age, when I a 6-year-old me, would I wanted someone in my family to talk to me like that? So it's often
and were you spoken to like that? That's the interesting thing. Where did you learn this? Were you spoken to like
we won't go into that one on here.
So, you know, it's there's so many more levels to go to.
There is, but I think
it's getting that awareness. Oh, I'm speaking to myself like that again.
But I also think there's this thing of, you hit the nail on the head at the beginning of this podcast, of the people we were surrounded with. They were model-esque, like my mother, my aunts, even my grandmothers were so glamorous and so slim, and really watched what they ate, and you know, they didn't limit what they ate, but their portion control was super. I remember their portion control. Oh no, we'll just have a little bit of this, or we'll just have a little bit of that. They were always very mindful of what they ate, and I think when you've grown up with that, it does make things more challenging when we've got so much more choice and easy and convenient, and thinking, oh, I just need a sugar fix, or I just need something to get me through the next hour because of work and other things.
And the physiological reaction that we have to sugar is real. We have it, we have a burst of energy, and then we have a crash. And what do we need when we're at the bottom of that crash is more sugar. So we get on the sugar roller coaster.
And it's exactly that. It is this sugar roller coaster. And I think when we're busy and we have busy lives, instead of just stopping and saying, you know what, I'm just going to have some blueberries and maybe some carrot sticks and hummus, because that will just fix it for now. It's easier sometimes just to go and grab a bar of, you know, your favorite chocolate.
And even working backwards to the beginning of the day, you don't need to snack if you're having really good food. And that also takes effort, because yes, when our kids were young and they were going somewhere, they'd have the right clothes, they'd have the right food, they'd have this everything would all be in a box ready for them to go. It takes 5 minutes if you get organized to throw some stuff together if you're going out. But do we do that for ourselves?
Yeah.
So you actually go backwards to the beginning of the day and have the really good food. You might not actually have the crash.
But I don't think we make time for food nowadays that we used to. I think that's the other thing, isn't it? Is we don't make time. I remember growing up, it was always a big thing, breakfast,
Mm.
lunch, and dinner.
Mm.
It was always a big thing, and the fruit bowl was always full. If you want a snack, grab something out of the fruit bowl. And
Mm.
that's how it was. And it was pretty not regimented, but we knew those were the boundaries, those were the rules. That's how we lived as a family. And I don't think we have those same boundaries nowadays because we're all so busy and our lives have just become so consumed and there's so much convenience that we don't sit and make those meals and do it from scratch and have and think about a balanced diet and something that's wholesome that's going to keep us sustained.
And delicious.
Yes,
And you
actually, that's
can
very
actually throw things together. I do very quick meals because I have 4 to feed and I want to do really good food. So I do batch cooking. I do one pot cooking. But it's just so important to have really tasty, delicious food as well. Because you've got to look at the food. But we've been told that the solution is in the food, whereas actually the solution is within us.
yes.
And there is so much hope because if I can do it, and I lost over 60 pounds, which is about 4 stone. And I say over because I stopped getting on the scales. I didn't want to know. So if I can lose 4 stone and keep it off, anyone can.
Oh, Katy, it's a wonderful place to stop.
It is actually, isn't it? Just hope.
Yeah.
Hope, I think, is the most important word in our language because we lose hope and there is so much.
And you look fabulous, Katy. You look absolutely incredible. You
Well,
really
thank you.
you do.
I I
You
I
walk your
keep forgetting
talk.
how old I am because I don't know what happens. You get to 50 and then you actually forget your age.
Yes, well, I'm
And
trying to.
so when you said 53, I was thinking, I wish, but it does change the way you look when you're working on other things as well as food, gratitude, stress, self-care, connection, feeling your feelings.
There's so much, isn't there?
So much.
And it's
I
not
don't know
one
how we've got
size
it all
fits
in, but we
all.
have.
I know, but it's not one size fits all. When you work with clients, it isn't.
Never.
You've got to get down to the nitty-gritty of what's their switch.
I love that what's their switch because every switch is different.
Totally different. Yeah,
So different.
yeah. Well, we could talk all day.
We could.
I can talk all day to most people. It's terrible. That's why I'm doing this podcast. Katy, we will probably ask you back again because I know I'm probably going to be bombarded with questions from people. So we
I've
would love
so enjoyed it.
It's been wonderful. If you want to get hold of Katy, we will drop her details in at the bottom of this podcast and we'll be liking and sharing and putting this out to all our usual platforms with Katy's details of how you can connect with her. Thank you all. Please like and subscribe because that helps us to move this platform forward and get more people just hearing the wonderful things that our guests have to say. And in the meantime, Katy, once again, a million thanks. It's been enlightening. It's been wonderful. And I didn't cry.
Great stuff.
That's even better. So thank you. And thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, Jim.
Until next time. Thank you.
Next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.